Hey, thanks for tuning into this workshop. I'm really excited about what we're going to be doing today. So just a quick heads up, we're in Studio F at Capital University, and my friend Doug is going to be drumming for us today. And what we've got is kind of two parts to the workshop, and you can pick around where you want to go. But the first part we're going to do is we're going to manipulate the sounds of the drum. So you can see just in the frame there, I have a stereo mic set up. So we're going to keep the stereo mic super clean. We could multi-mic things, but I just want to be real simple and so you can hear what's going on with that. So we're going to do things like giant hi-hats. I've got some paper clips we're going to be using. He also brought some toys. We'll talk about some alternatives for that. So the first part is manipulating the drum sound at the source, and you might be then using regular mics on that. Part two of the workshop is then going to be using interesting mics, what I like to call as bad mics, kind of trashy mics, and really sort of getting interesting sounds and being inspired by the sounds that those sources give us. So that's the two parts. Cool, let's do it. Okay, so for the first manipulation of the sound, we're going to take the shells and the heads and we're going to reduce the resonance. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. You might be familiar with moon gels in white or black cases. And these are like these wacky wall walker type materials. And they can stick on the shells. And this will reduce the resonance. Really selective, very cool because you can just put one on or two on. And they're pretty neat that way. There's also things you might be familiar with as far as these O-ring dampeners. Now you can buy these from the different drum manufacturers, or as you're going through drum heads, keep your old drum heads and you can use that also to make some of these dampeners. So old drum heads are pretty great for that. Doug brought what's called the Big Fat Snare Drum. So this is sort of a several ply, really piece of thick plastic with a reinforcement ring that's going to go on the drum, and it's going to allow some of the air to escape, but it's not going to leave the drum. It's going to make this really, really cool sound on both the snare drum, and we'll audition on the floor tom. You'll see what that sounds like. So the Big Fat Snare Drum, really, really cool. The other one that was new to me that he brought is the Big Fat Snare Drum with jingles. So now you can see what's going to happen every time you hit the snare drum. You're going to get this extra percussive sound. So we're going to hear what both of these sound like. So we've dampened the drums a little bit, and now let's talk about what we can do to the cymbals. There are all sorts of interesting things you can do to the cymbals. One, we've got product. You can use tambourines, even kids' tambourines. This is a Meinl product called the Ching ring that will go on the hi-hat. So again, if you're the hi-hat accents, we'll get that extra sizzle that might versus the Big Fat Snare Drum rings, which will give on the downbeat. There's that. The ride cymbals, there's some really interesting things you can do, and there's some cymbals have rivets in them that will give you this extra long sustain. Kind of the homemade versions, two different ways. One, you might have an old keychain or lamp cord or ceiling fan, and you can use that. And then you can also see I've got paper clips that work very similar. Now, the key to these doing what you want them to do is they need to get to the edge of the cymbal. But you can play with that depending how much of that sustain and that sizzle you want. More at the edge, which is where the vibrations are greatest, that will sustain for a long time. The other thing that we're going to hear is that we're going to misuse the hi-hat. So we're going to take the biggest cymbals. I think we got two 16-inch crashes, and we're going to make, or is it 18-inch? 18-inch crashes. And we're going to make hi-hats out of those 18-inch crashes, and you're going to hear how different that's going to sound. And the last thing that we're going to do when talking about manipulating the drums is what the drummer is hitting with. So we've got kind of bigger fat sticks with small heads, and we have wood tips here. Plastic tips also change the sound a little bit, but there's also really fun things you can do. You could find some mallets, which will give you some very, very different sounds that you can use for jazz stuff, but you could also use these unconventionally in different ways. These are pretty cool. You might be familiar with rods. These are also really give kind of in between brushes and sticks. It's a lighter sound, so those are pretty neat. And then Doug also brought, we're calling these broomsticks, which are basically the bristles of a broom in a stick form that is going to give another different kind of sound. So we'll hear what all these different sticks sound like back on the regular drum kit. when that shines, when it's on the foot.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to go, 4 tones.
Yeah, that was good. That was good.
Cymbal thing.
They go on forever. Now we've got 18-inch crash cymbals as hi-hats. So this can sound really cool. A little bit of control is going to help a lot, but we're going to see also he's just going to open it up and just play a fast beat and just it sounds awesome. And then halfway through we were recording, and we're going to I'll have him add both the open snare and then the Big Fat Snare Drum and show you how much that changes kind of just the tonality, these little tiny things at the source with just a stereo microphone. We'll hear that. We also got creative and grabbed 2 splash cymbals and made a little stacker there. So, you know, different times, splash cymbals and crash cymbals. We could stack any couple cymbals up, but since we were kind of on this side of the kit, we just took 2 little two little splash cymbals and stacked those up. So you'll hear that what that sounds like as well. Again, stereo mic, just thinking about the source. And I'm going to have Doug share his thoughts on what that does from a drummer perspective. Grab the Big Fat Snare.
Similar.
Yeah, just... That sounds awesome.
I want to like retract the last 5 things I did.
As a drummer, what happens to your playing when the kit that you're kind of used to starts to have some different elements added to it and different sounds? For instance, the 18-inch crash cymbal or the sizzlers on the ride cymbal. What happens to you as a drummer?
Yeah, it definitely brings out a different thing you're playing depending on what you're looking at. I love cymbals, different cymbal options. You know, something like I've had these little splash cymbals for 30 years or something, and it makes me think of like tricky little Stuart Copeland things or something, but then like you stack them and you get like a completely different sound. It's very modern, it's kind of, it's playful, but it seems very contemporary somehow. You can crank this down really tight and have like kind of a tight sound, or you can have them looser and have a little more splashy. It's very cool. Crash cymbal stackers, I do a lot. It's nice to use them in conjunction with one another. And this, you know, honestly, I haven't done this before. I didn't think to do something this big, but this is a really great sound, and like the tone of it brings a completely different thing out of your playing. Like, I don't want to play as tricky with it. I just want to like really hear like the meat of it, because it's just got a lot of meat to it compared to your standard 14-inch cymbal. So that's something that's really fun to play with and definitely brings something different out of your playing.
So we've put the kit back to its regular form. So we've taken off all the jingly things. We do have a damper on the snare head that we liked better. So we're kind of back to that. So now I'm going to be doing sort of the recording side and talking about the ways to manipulate that. So one of the things I did is a 57. A lot of you probably have this mic or something similar. Pretty standard dynamic cardioid pattern, so it's going to have that heart shape. And this is a position I found that's kind of interesting that doesn't get talked about a lot, but which is over the drummer's right shoulder. And the idea is the drummer sets the kit up the way they like it, where it sounds good to them, and this kind of mimics that. Now, if you have two microphones, stereo miking in this position actually works really, really well. But I'm just going to use one mic, so I don't know where everyone's at. So I've got a single 57 over the shoulder. Add a kick drum mic, and you actually have a really decent mono drum sound, but really decent drum sound. So we're going to hear what that sounds like. Usually the snare drum sounds really good in this, because again, the drummer has tuned the snare drum from about this height. So that's where it sounds perfect, as opposed to being 2 inches over the shell. So regular microphone, but kind of interesting, maybe a new to you technique. We'll go around here. This may look familiar to you. This is a Guitar Hero mic. So what I've done with the Guitar Hero mic is I've cut off the end and soldered an XLR cable onto it. I thought this would just be fun. A lot of you probably have these shoved into your cabinets or are not using these anymore. Well, it's a microphone and going to give you sort of interesting tonality. Is it hi-fi? No. Is it lo-fi? I wouldn't say that either. It's just kind of interesting. So we'll hear what the Guitar Hero sounds like. On the floor is a realistic speaker from the thrift store. I paid 90 cents for this, and I wired it up. So what it had our two poles out the back. So I found a guitar cable that either had been repaired or dismantled. I literally just bared wires and shoved it in there, and it works as a microphone. It's essentially a dynamic microphone backwards, but it sounds like you're underwater. So we'll maybe do a little EQ to see what that one sounds like. While I'm here, I also got this contact microphone. So you can use contact microphones for all sorts of interesting things and triggering MIDI events. In this case, I'm going to actually take some electrical tape and I'm going to tape it to the snare drum. It makes this really kind of nasty sound. Again, may not be the snare drum sound, but it might snuck underneath there. Or again, for kind of trashy loops, it'll be kind of interesting. So we're going to be taping this on the shell of the snare drum. So I'm going to move that up. And I've just got some tape, and we'll make sure it's on there pretty well. Okay, also while I'm down here, one of my trusty favorites. This is an old rotary telephone. And what I've done is wired it up with another guitar cable. I'm actually using the speaker element for this. Now, a couple different reasons why, but again, a microphone and a speaker are similar. But what's cool about this is you don't even need a soldering iron. You just need bare wire, and you can see there's a flathead screwdriver. Put your ground wire and your conductor wire, tuck it in there, and you now have telephone. And you'll hear what this sounds like. If you don't know what old telephone sounds like, it's kind of hilarious. The other thing I have going is another Radio Shack item from the thrift store is a tape deck. So you can see here, this has a microphone built in right here on the tape deck, and I'm running the headphone output. Now there's some interesting issues with this. You don't actually have to run it. You can put it in pause, which will activate the record head. And you can see it just takes a little bit of signal to start clipping the input, running out of the ear bud where you plug in your headphones to a DI box. Now the other thing about this is you'll see these DI boxes. So this lets us interface with our setup here, and some of these do need a DI box because your interface may or may not have this. And what's important is we have to go through the mic preamp to do this. So I'm using a headphone adapter to run into the DI box. That changes the impedance and lets me run it through a mic pre. So just because it has this 1/4 inch end doesn't mean you can run it through just into your interface. You need to run it through some sort of gain stage. So we're running it through a mic preamp. So I've got the tape deck as well. And then the last thing I'll do is I'm actually then I have a cassette in the tape deck, and I actually recorded, I did have it rolling, you saw it was rolling. I'm actually then going to dump that and line it up with the digital. So you'll hear both using the electronics of the tape deck, so it's going through the microphone, through the electronics, out the the power amp for where the headphones are, but then I also have what did it print on the cassette deck, and we'll see how that might be different versus just the through of the cassette deck. So let's go see what all that sounds like.
All right, now we've got all the fun mics to play with, and I'm going to be using this section of Doug playing, and we'll take a listen. So the first thing I thought we'd do is just take a listen. I added a kick drum and a snare drum mic to the overheads, and let's see what that sounds like. Good drum sound. Only thing I've done on this EQ is flip the polarity. But that's no EQ, and I've just got touching the master fader, and looks like we're doing a little bit. Nope, that was on my voice. Cool. So let's look at the 57 over the shoulder. Let's go in order. So this is just, again, straight 57. I've got anything on there bypassed. That's an okay mono drum sound. We add the kick drum mic. And let's add a little compression. It's pretty spectacular, right? It's hard to have fault with that. Again, quick, easy drum sound. If you're demoing a song, you have limited inputs on your I/O interface, not really doing any processing, just added a little bit of compression there. So that's pretty cool. Let's go to the Guitar Hero mic and see what that sounds like. This is in front of the kit. You can hear it's got a little bit of weird resonance. When I was playing with this, and I thought there would be something fun to do if you added into your, maybe the kick and the mono setup. That's all three now. Let's mute the Guitar Hero. Unmute the Guitar Hero. Mute. Unmute. I'm just kind of curious. I don't know what this will sound like. I don't think that works. But it kind of brings out an interesting personality. I think that's pretty cool. Let's go to the realistic speaker. Now, this was down by the kick drum, so let's just listen to it by itself. I think my description of underwater is appropriate. $0.90 speaker from the thrift store, guitar cable that I had laying around. Let's go ahead and put a little EQ and compression on that. I'll show you the settings. Here's this. I can think of all sorts of uses. With what I have going on here, I thought, well, what happens if I've got my regular drum sound, and I'm using air quotes over regular. Now let's add the speaker. Or let's go back to our mono drum sound. Without it. With it. Without it. With it. Without it. See, that's cool. Cool. Let's go to the contact speaker. Now, this is just basically a trigger, but I've recorded it. So you could use it to trigger MIDI elements, to have the drummer's snare hit, trigger MIDI events, tambourines, all sorts of things in different DAWs or live. But I recorded it, so it's pretty awful. Let's hear it. It's pretty awful. Now, let's just listen to our mono drum set. Certain amount of trashy that's pretty cool there. If you look at the waveform here, it's pretty gated out, but we'll make sure with any kind of noise and we'll limit that. And then I put this fuzz on here. Let's see what this sounds like. If we add our guitar hero. That sounds really pretty cool. The phone mic, we're going to find these in thrift stores and in garage sales. Here's what just the phone sounds like. That's just laying on the ground. It's not on a stand. It kind of doesn't matter where you put it in the room. Let's add a little EQ. A little bit of compression. So you can see I've got the all buttons in and not even really moving the metering. And let's go to our mono drum sound. Without it. With it. Without it. Without it. With it. All by itself. Let's throw the speaker in there. Oh! Oh, man! That's making me smile. I love that. That's hot. That's hot. That's hot. Okay. Let's go to the tape recorder. Now, it's just parked in record mode. It's not actually rolling tape. I rolled tape, and I'll show you what that sounds like, and I'll also show you the issue of syncing that, which you can't. But let me show you that parked or the tape transfer basically sound exactly the same. So here's just the tape recorder. I'll also point out, look at that waveform. Whenever you see a waveform that looks like a lawnmower has gone to it, that tells you supreme clipping. If you remember from the intro, it just takes a little bit of signal and it was basically clipping right there. I don't need any processing because it's already been limited to death. But here's the tape recorder. That sounds like drums right off a cassette 4-track with that speaker. I'm not going for hi-fi, folks. I'm going for the opposite. I'm going for interesting. Let's go ahead and throw our good mics in there and see what That's awesome. I'm loving that. Okay, so let's talk about the tape recorder and the tape transfer. So I'm going to go back and forth. For those who are Pro Tools proficient, what I've done is gone into XOR mode for solo so I can bounce between them. And when I transferred, I didn't pay enough attention to match the levels. So you can see I've kind of jacked up the transfer to match the tape recorder. So the volume is same when I go back and forth. So here is the tape recorder. And tape transfer. Tape recorder, tape transfer. It's a little darker. There's a little bit of a tone difference, but I would not say like, oh, that's so significant that it's worth doing. Because here's the other thing. I lined it up in the beginning. So it pretty much is aligned here. If you look, right? They're a little out of sequence, but I'll show you what happens by the time the tape plays. Now I've got individual kick drums and snare drums. There's just no way to sync those up. So that is all supposed to be in sync. If I play it here at the beginning, you have just witnessed tape flange, right? That's so cool, right? So you've got the same track playing at two different speeds, like literally right off a Lenny Kravitz record or a Smashing Pumpkins record, tape flange. Oh, that's awesome. Now, it only works at the very beginning, and then what ends up happening, the farther you go along, the delay just gets bigger and bigger. Because it doesn't get back into sync and then fall out of sync. You'd have to continually mess with it, which you could, right? You could get in here and edit it, but that's not what the point of this exercise is. Here, it's pretty close. You can start hearing it flamming, and by the time you get over here, the tape off the cassette deck is clearly playing at a different speed than the regimented samples per second of Pro Tools. So the point is, the tape transfer is cool for a quick tape flange. It's cool if you record the drums on that, transfer to that, and then play to that. But you can't transfer from the cassette and sync. It would be a big deal to do that. So that's a rundown of all the interesting sounds you can get from maybe collectively $20 worth of microphone. Well, if you had the 57, okay, $100 worth of microphones, $50 used 57, Guitar Hero, $5 at the thrift store, Realistic speaker, 90 cents, contact microphone, you can make that, Google it, telephone, $1, tape recorder, $3, and a cassette, blank cassette, $3. I want to thank Lisa Cave and all the students involved in putting on this event. It was really cool. I was inspired by all the work you did. I wanted to participate. This was a lot of work, but it was worth doing. So great job. I want to thank Capital University for believing in the music technology program and building a beautiful Studio F. How about Doug Caraway? Amazing drummer. How fun is this to listen to these examples when we have a good drummer, right? So be inspired by these sounds. I find it really fun. Follow us on Instagram and enjoy the rest of the event.